Yes. All right. Well, hello, and thank you so much, Julio, for inviting me to come and speak. And I am going to talk about pioneering analog aquanautics, which is actually a whole new field of using the ocean or underwater to train future astronauts. And NASA has already been doing this. For many years, where the astronauts actually they don't go into the ocean, but they go into a huge underwater pool called the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. And the reason why we use water is because water is an analog of microgravity, and so that's why it's a really good environment to be able to train in. And but that's under the NASA space astronaut entity. And so what we're doing is to try to open this up to the commercial sectors and also for education. So with this, we are actually going to pioneer a series of MMARS analog aquanautics in 2026. But we are working with this group from China called UMIC, and it's the underwater modular capsule, integrated capsule, which is still at its early prototype. We'll talk more about that. You'll see more about that. But I think this is a really exciting area to expand astronautics training. All right. So, first of all, I am Dr. Susan Jewell. I'm the CEO of MMARS. MMARS is Mars Moon Astronautic Academy and Research Sciences. And we are one of the vanguards or pioneer in astronautics. We formed the company back in 2012. And since then, over nearly a decade, we have actually expanded analog astronautics missions to multi-fidelity, pioneering going to Nepal, 15,000 feet. And then next year, we actually will be going to Everest Base Camp and going to really what we call extreme environments, right? Not just what we considered low fidelity, which is the desert, or somewhere where it's still a simulation, but it's considered low fidelity because it's not like high risk to life and death, where these extreme environments are. All right. So with that said, I think I'm going to change to the next slide. All right. So first of all, why do we want to go underwater to prepare for space living and for astronauts to prepare for space living? Because I've just mentioned, ocean is the Earth's most accessible space analog. Would you believe? In fact, I think, most of planet Earth is water, and we have very little land really. So I think it's also a biome that the ocean itself, we it's a large unknown factor of planet Earth. And so another aspect of why we want to explore the ocean is to understand what is the ocean. And it water is the essential you know um element for living, right? So that is another reason why we want to explore our ocean, and using these analog training analogs is another way to do that. So like I said, the the ocean is an environment that also have to allow the humans to develop the capability to live under ice, and ice is isolated confined environments, right? So that could be living in a space capsule, living in a analog habitat, living in your bedroom during COVID. So anything that's I've considered ice is something that has a lot of challenges for humans to live long term in, because it can affect a lot of things like confinement, pressure. Of course, underwater, there's hyperbaric pressure, sensory alterations happen, psychological issues, physiological issues. So these are challenges that we are going to be encountering when we live beyond Earth, right? And so underwater analog habitats allow us to simulate these microgravity situations or conditions. So, for example, we can practice extravehicular activities or EVAs underwater, test life support, test communication, emergency systems, and many other things that's impossible actually for us to do on land, right? So these environments underwater offers a safe, extreme environments that we can study also crew dynamics, cohesion, cooperation, collaboration, so on and so forth, and behavioral health. So that's why I think it's very important for us to incorporate aquanautics. The other very special area, which is a whole field in medicine itself, is hyperbaric medicine. So looking at how a hyperbaric pressure underwater causes differences in examining gaseous exchange in the body, decompression physiology, definitely circadian dysrhythmia, right? Disruption, which astronauts encounter also in analog missions as well. And then learning, for example, psychological issues like stress adaptation, reducing anxiety, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of reasons why we want to use this platform or these environments to be able to expand space training or allowing us to solve some challenges, or not some, there's a lot of challenges for us to eventually go into these very dangerous environments like space. Well, first of all, let's examine some of the established habitats that have been underwater over the last 30 years, and then look at what's coming, the new innovation in underwater habitats. And it's really very fascinating and exciting times, I think, for aquanautics. So as we examine the evolution of these underwater habitats, it's important to recognize that analog aquanautics actually has a very long and rich heritage. So it's not something new. It's been there for multiple decades. So projects such as NASA's NEMO underwater habitat, which has just 2 years ago closed for actual human habitation, which is a sad fact, but that's the way it is. But that actually is one of the very first NASA underwater habitat that's done a lot of missions. And then at the Aquarius Reef base. Then there's the Jewell underwater lodge, which is where we're going to be deploying our series of aquanautics missions under MMARS in 2026, which is off the Florida Keys. And then this is very exciting, this new habitat that's been built in Europe by the Swiss. It's called Deep. It's Deep Sentinel Habitat. And the idea is literally being able to build the future of actually having long-term colonized or settlement underwater. So having an underwater city is where they're heading, right? And building this first of all, of course, doing a prototype of one first and testing it. And then it's similar to where the ISS is, right? That's in space. This is going to be its counterpart in water. And I think this is really exciting where the innovation is going. And then, of course, UMIC. UMIC is something very new. It's something I'm going to talk about, but this is also a new concept idea of modularity, expandability, portability for underwater habitats. But anyway, you can see a lot of the differences. Some are tethered, where they were built. And UMIC is very, I think, is where we should be going because it's untethered. It's not stuck to, or, tethered to the ocean floor. And therefore, you can take it anywhere. It's portable. You can expand on it because it's like pods. All right. So I think this concept, construct, architecture of this underwater habitat is where we should be going in terms of how we're going to build our aquanautics. All right. So here we are. This is actually where, they're building. This is a prototype that they have been testing in the last 12, 14 months over in China. They're a Chinese organization, and Dr. Chris Yun is the co-founder and the pioneer and part of the Explorers Club there. So he came up with this concept, and their whole team of scuba divers, researchers started testing, building this. And you could see it's really, in terms of a conceptual framework of UMIC, right, the underwater modular integrated capsule, that it's scalable, it's self-contained because it's these separate modules or pods that can be connected together, right? But it's the fact that you can go anywhere with it. At this point, of course, they're restricting it to, near the ocean shoreline, and not going too deep in the ocean, but because they're still prototyping. But the possibilities and the benefits of this architecture design is very unique in itself. And it's very similar to what MMARS architecture, our base camp is, which I'll show you later, right? So the fact that this can be scalable, it's self-contained, you can reconfigure the structure, the layout, you can expand in terms of number of crew participants, aquanautics. You're not set in the number and limited like most of these analog stations out there, these low fidelity. You can only have a certain number capacity of crew members. But in this configuration or this architecture structure, you can keep expanding out and you can increase the number of participants, right? So also, the UMIC module functions as an autonomous life-supporting pod. So if one pod is compromised, you can close that off and it doesn't, affect the rest of the station have, which I think is critically important, right? Obviously. So then the other benefit is not only is it modular architecture, it also allows for rapid assembly, disassembly, which is important, right? And portability and so on and so forth. And then each pod, which is kind of what MR station is like, is actually a designated function area. So one area would be a laboratory, another would be, a clinic, another would be a conference call, and so on and so forth. I think you get the idea. So I think this is really a very unique innovation in terms of underwater habitats for training aquanauts. So the historical context is that our understanding of undersea habitation, and by extension of space habitation, it stands on 6 decades of innovation. It started, who was actually my childhood mentor, is Jacques Cousteau. He built the Conchal missions. He's one of the eminent pioneer in underwater exploration, and Jacques Cousteau in the 1960s. So the first experiment of his true experiment in human life support and adaptation under pressure was with Conchal 2, and then it expanded to Sea Lab, and then all these others, and then NASA Nemo, and so on. So, like I said, it's not a new concept. It's just the concept of a new paradigm of architecture using technology to be able to build something, but also the vision to build it as a permanent city underwater is, to me, a really pioneering but an exciting vision to actually build out. So not only, and I think it would be a great test bed for us before we start actually building lunar or Martian habitats, right? You actually train the astronauts in this underwater, habitat, or eventually, a settlement. All right, so I'm not going to go too much into all this. All right, so with this, then, you know, one of the most transformative aspects of the UMIC underwater of the UMIC habitat is that I've already said portability, expandability. But if you can see here on the right, we have built a Mars here. You could see we have our low fidelity base camp in Mojave Desert in California since 20 well we had an older version, but in 26 we started in 2012, and then we built this whole new concept with NASA technology where it's modular portable, and you could see these are similar concept. These are separate pods connected by tunnels, and it's the same benefits and advantage. So we've had crews that could go up to 12 to 15. We're actually now starting to expand to build the first analog astronaut space settlement in the Mojave Desert, because that's where we deploy our low fidelity missions, right? So it's the same concept, right? Where you're bringing in the idea of modularity, portability, expandability, and so on, and that is the way to actually look at architecture for building designs for habitats, not only here on Earth, but definitely and underwater, but also on a planet surface. So just to give you here, just what they have, this is their sort of 3D version when they first started. The hubs or pods, you have the tunnels to ISS actually, right? Where it's just like all these modules connected together. You can disassemble them and you can keep adding on. So, but what's important is the incorporation of basic life support system technology in each pod. And there you see, this is kind of what they are seeing, the UMIC concept when they build up the whole idea of hub and spoke modular design. And this is where we are going to be building the space analog city or settlements out in the Mojave, probably within the next 2 years. We will do this uses the design of a hub and spoke, and you can keep, just keep expanding out. We have, our facility out there already, but we haven't built the city. And the whole idea of that is now you're not going to have these small crews. I mean, it's great having a small crew, but we've been doing that for nearly 20 years, right? But now we want to expand that to also increase the number and build it into a settlement where you're going to have maybe 50 to 100 or even more eventually to be an actual city. And they live there not for 2 weeks or 2 months, or so. But by the way, I just finished a 21-day at the UND, University of North Dakota, 21-day annual mission out there, Ilmer habitat. But usually it's very short and you can only do so much in a short period. So we want to expand that and say, in this concept, you're going to have a whole group of community living for maybe 1 year to 3 years, right? That's when you can really build out the technology, test it, looking at the human behavior, and build these enclosed loop systems because you're there for a long period of time. All right. So this is kind of my last one. I think I want to give a shout out to Dennis Chamberlain. He actually is one of the earliest underwater aquanaut. He actually coined the word, I think, aquanauts, and he came up with the idea of aquanautic settlement. He wrote these books. He was part of building the Nemo underwater habitat, when it came out. So, yeah, check him out, and we really want to work with him to build out his vision, which he came up with nearly 20 years ago, right? This whole idea of living underwater, the undersea colonies. These are books that you can buy and to understand. But I think finally, where we're at this juncture with the innovation, with the technology, the capability, and the interest and the funding, that this vision is actually going to manifest within the next, 5, 8 years, and we want to be part of that. And that's another reason why MMARS wants to build out and train the analog aquanautics. I think it's an important aspect in terms of looking at how do we live in extreme environments. And the ocean is part of our biome, and we should do more exploration with that. So thank you so much for listening. And if you want to reach out, and we will be selecting a whole series of analog aquanauts to join our mission in 2026. Obviously, these are mid fidelity. We consider mid fidelity because it is pretty risky in terms of life and death. And so you have to go through our low fidelity missions first, right? So reach out. And if you want to know more, if you want to collaborate, if you want to partner with us, if you want to join the MMARS mission. And by the way, we do also have a MMARS virtual analog astronautics training program as well. So with that, I want to end here and open up to questions. Thank you so much.